So, thank you everyone for joining us today. I am Jodie Tadlock, Senior Associate Director of Career Advising at IUB Luddy Career Services. And we thank you for taking the time out to hear this very special conversation with Ellie Valentine. She is a passionate advocate and dedicated professional in the fight against human trafficking, especially within the context of tech-related scams targeting young individuals. Ellie holds a Master of Library Science degree from our own IU Luddy School here at Bloomington. She graduated in 1989. She also earned a Bachelor of Arts in Russian and East European Studies from the University at Albany. Currently, she's living and working overseas in Kazakhstan, where she's on a crucial assignment with Winrock International, implementing the USAID Safe Migration in Central Asia project. Ellie's work these days includes combating a particular form of trafficking, the exploitation of young people enticed by lucrative tech opportunities only to be ensnared in cyber scams. Recently, she's been actively engaged in addressing a concerning trend, which has documented over 200 cases of young IT professionals falling victim into cyber scamming networks in what they call the Golden Triangle of Southeast Asia. With her expertise, compassion, and unwavering commitment, Ellie is at the forefront of efforts to safeguard vulnerable individuals from falling prey to these exploitive schemes. Her work not only sheds light on the complexities of modern-day trafficking, but also underscores the urgent need for international cooperation and innovative solutions to combat this pervasive threat. Ellie's created a great informational presentation to share with us today, and then afterward, her and I can have a chat, and maybe she can answer some additional questions for us. Thank you, Ellie.
Thank you very much, Jodie. And I'm really pleased to be able to share the work that we've been doing at Winrock International with the students and faculty, and maybe even some alumni at the Luddy School at IU. As Jodie said, I'm currently what's called the Chief of Party of the USAID Safe Migration in Central Asia activity of in living in Kazakhstan, but our program is in 4 countries of Central Asia. Today's presentation is really an attempt to help you be aware of what some of the cyber scamming trafficking schemes are now that we're seeing not only of Central Asians, but it's a global phenomenon. I'll get into that in a moment. As Jodie said, it was 200 cases only of Kazakhs that I was mentioning, but there really have been hundreds of thousands of cases, and that's why we want to do everything we can to make sure that those who may be targets for these schemes are aware of it. So just to give you an idea, Winrock International is a U.S. NGO based in Little Rock, Arkansas. Winrock is because of Winthrop Rockefeller, and he established Winrock International in Arkansas in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s. Mostly to do research on warm weather agriculture and animal husbandry. But out of that research and in collaboration with his brother, who was actually working in Southeast Asia, they collaborated to develop an international research institute, which eventually turned into Winrock International, which has been doing international development work at a global scale since 1985. I actually worked with Winrock International about 24 years ago, and was the director of their very first trafficking prevention program, which was in Ukraine. And since then, Winrock International has had this global reach of trafficking prevention programs in about 17 countries. We're currently have 11 countries, most of them in Asia. And the reason for that is that we have an umbrella project called Asia CTIP, under which there are different programs in individual countries of Asia, and that includes Bangladesh, Cambodia, Laos, Nepal, Thailand, most recently Vietnam, and our 4 countries in Central Asia. We are funded. That program is funded by the U.S. Agency for International Development, but we also have programs that are funded by the U.S. Department of State anti-trafficking divisions, and we have other funders like the Swiss Development Corporation, and also private sector such as Nestle's is another funder in our programs in Asia to prevent forced labor in such areas as palm oil and sugarcane production. So our focus is on preventing trafficking in persons, increasing the opportunities for prosecutions of trafficking crimes, but very much so on survivor protection and prevention of burgeoning schemes of new types of trafficking. And so we try to incorporate innovation in our own programs to keep up with unfortunate innovations by the traffickers themselves. So just a few words about our program, which is focused in Central Asia. And I don't know if you know it, but Indiana University is one of the unique centers for Inter-Asian and Uralic studies, which includes the study of language and culture, history, and political science of Central Asia, and has been a national resource center funded by the Department of Education for many decades, and is a very unique center in the United States focused on this region. Our project, implemented by Winrock International, is a 5-year project that started in 2019, which meant that a lot of our startup coincided with COVID. But it is slated to go until August of this year. We're hoping for an extension, and we're waiting. Maybe that'll even come tonight. We'll see. Our goal is to promote a human rights-based, victim-centered approach to safe migration and countering human trafficking, working on systems, working with government, working with NGOs, working with academic centers on systems to reduce the vulnerability to all forms of trafficking. And trafficking can be sexual exploitation, labor exploitation. It can be also be a type of organ harvesting, and also in some countries, also bride kidnapping is something that is a phenomena in Central Asia that we deal with, and also illegal surrogacy is another area that can fall into the trafficking nomenclature. So we do work in these 4 countries. We do not work in Tajikistan, but it doesn't mean that we're not focused on some of the phenomena that affects Tajikistan. And in fact, Kazakhstan itself is mostly a destination country, which means that labor migrants come from Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, a transit country for Russia, which is a major destination for labor migration, Turkey, which is also a major destination for labor migration, but we're also seeing more and more labor migrants looking to go outside of those 2 centers to Europe, to East Asia, and also to the United States and North America. So our focus also supports both government agencies, but also NGOs in expanded victim identification and assistance. So this was COVID, right? And when we remember remember COVID, we remember that a lot of us were locked down across the world. And what that meant is that a lot of us were online a lot more. What happened was that traffickers also were more online, and they were trying to abuse the vulnerabilities of those who were online by learning new ways to scam people, but also new ways to have the exploited labor that they needed to implement those scams. So what we've seen since COVID, especially, is an exponential rise in these online trafficking schemes. Recruitment into the cyber scamming area is primarily initially through social media or messaging apps. And then what we find is that those who have been trafficked will end up blackmailed or forced to recruit people that they know. So it becomes particularly insidious because you say, oh, well, Michael has a great job in Thailand, and he's telling me that I should come and work in the company that he's working for because it's such a great job. What he doesn't know is that Michael has been forced to criminal activity for cyber scamming that becomes that he can't get out of until he's recruited, let's say, 5 more people, and then he's released from the scamming camp. It's a very common modus operandi that we have seen. One of the partners of Winrock International in this umbrella Asia CTIP program is an organization called the Mekong Club. The Mekong Club director is a former U.S. Department of State, USAID, and UN official who is resident in Hong Kong and has been working on anti-trafficking work for about the last 20 years. His name is Matt Freeman, and Matt has said that in his 20 years of anti-trafficking work, of the work that he's done, mostly in Asia, he has never seen schemes quite as brutal as the current cyber scamming camps in the Golden Triangle of Southeast Asia. Recently, the Mekong Club made this PSA, a public service announcement, and I'd like to play that for you now. There we go. So I think that that's a very effective view of how you might think that you're applying for a legitimate job, and it may turn out to be very different. So why the Golden Triangle? Partly and some of our partners, as well as Interpol, who has been doing a lot of investigation on these scams. It really is because there was a free economic zone where there was a lot of gambling centers and casinos in the Golden Triangle. So the Golden Triangle being between Myanmar, Laos, Cambodia, and Thailand. What we've found is that those casinos during COVID were not operating. And so the casino owners and businesses were looking to see what could they do to make up their revenues. And so this is when they started to build camps on the borders in this area, and that was where they were recruiting a lot of people from China once the Chinese border, but really from all over Asia, from other centers around the globe. Right now, the estimate is that there are several 100,000 victims in the camps from about 65 countries. You might say, well, if you know that the camps are there, why aren't they doing anything about it? Unfortunately, part of it is corruption. Part of it is that there is political uncertainty and lack of leadership in the area, and it's also for some of the governments in the area very expensive for them to try and investigate the camps. So originally, we were looking at, as I said, the Golden Triangle here, but now we found that it's moving, and we found that there are camps in other areas on the border, on the Myanmar border with Thailand, in Cambodia, in the Philippines, and actually, as I said, the movement to those camps has been from all over the globe. But if you look at this map, you can see, okay, you know, the eastern part of South America, the eastern part of Africa, Central Asia, we now know is also included. But what that means is that's a long way for these scammers to have people travel. So now we're also finding that we have, and I think I will go here, that we're finding that there are camps in Georgia. There are camps that have been documented in Dubai. And most recently, I had a colleague tell me that there were camps in Namibia. There were just 77 victims rescued from a cyber camp in Namibia. So it may have started in Southeast Asia, but it's insidiously moving around the globe, and it seems to find opportunities wherever there is loose economic and legal framework where they can set up the camps, bring people in, abuse them. And of course they need, you know, internet, they need electricity. So they may go into a local area and say, oh, we're going to bring internet and electricity to your community. And then they use those resources for this scamming. This is a map by another partner of ours, the Humanity Research Consultancy, and they have done fantastic work rescuing victims from the camps in Southeast Asia. They are also based in Hong Kong, and many of their I'm sorry, they're not based in Hong Kong. They're based in Taiwan. Many of their efforts are to rescue out of the camps in the Golden Triangle. as I mentioned, Georgia, the coastal town in Georgia known as Batumi, was just recently identified as another another location where they have found apparently about 400 Chinese and Taiwanese that were being forced to scam in that location in Georgia. So what is, cyber scamming, cyber crime? What are we really talking about? A lot of it is also associated with the crypto trading, because they're scamming people online. They're asking people to invest in crypto. Webcamming is something that we saw particularly in Central Asia during COVID, which was where in offering young people, mostly women, but also men, to model online and eventually to become more and more intimate in their modeling, and then blackmailing them with the recordings of those instances, which became quite prevalent during COVID, especially in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. So I talked about the fake crypto trading. Pig butchering is something that there's been some quite a bit of attention to. It's basically, the idea is fattening somebody up by complimenting them, becoming their friend, being a trusted source, and then asking for money for whatever purpose they might come up with, depending on the person that they're scamming, and then really draining their resources. Task scamming is something that is quite interesting. It is mostly in the UK, is my understanding, but it's not too long ago, a couple of years ago, we were working with some interns from the university, and they were talking about being able to crowdsource tasks online. Well, this is using that sort of almost community resource, but tasking people to do a task, and then to be able to be paid for that task, they have to register on a platform and pay to register on that platform, but then they can't get the money out unless they add more money. And this is something that has become a snowball scamming scheme. And as I said, right now, my only source on the task scamming is from the UK, but it's possible that it's also in other places. Also, just recently, interestingly, there was something called the timeshare sales scamming. This is when, again, elderly people can be particularly vulnerable to some of these online scams. So they will say, well, you have a timeshare, you want to get rid of it. It's really hard to do that on the real estate market, but I can help you do that. And again, to be able to do it, they demand fees. After they get the fees, and they say, oh yes, we have your down payment, but you have to pay into a platform. And again, it snowballs until a significant amount of money has been lost in that scam. So again, the scamming itself, certainly criminal, certainly something that people need to be stopping. But what our focus is on is that those people who are running those scams, who are performing those scams, are very often victims who have been fraudulently brought into the arena and forced into those criminal activities, which would qualify them as victims of trafficking. I wanted to mention that there have been quite a number of international media reports, from very trusted sources, CNN has done special reports back in December of 2022, already trying to warn Americans of these scams. The New York Times has done a piece where they were highlighting the conditions that the people who have been forced into this criminality are suffering under. This BBC documentary documents the romance scams of pig butchering. And then The Scam Factory is a fascinating documentary that Deutsche Welle, the German media outlet, has done on the Golden Triangle area, and it follows people being scammed and being rescued from the scamming camps by a local NGO, and it really is quite an in-depth look at both the criminality of the scamming and traffickers, but also the amazing work that NGOs are doing at incredibly high risk in themselves. And then you may know this guy. I guess he's pretty popular in the US. I think he's gotten a bunch of Emmys, but he did a very good segment on pig butchering that if you haven't seen, I would highly recommend it. So it's not that it's not getting attention, but it is something that looks so attractive that people just think, oh, well, that it can't be me. It can't be me. I'm not stupid enough to fall for that. But unfortunately, the way that traffickers recruit is very targeted. And so they will also look for the kind of person that might be looking for an opportunity for work in a lucrative field, and we will even pay for you to come to Thailand. We'll even pay for you to come to Hong Kong. We'll even pay for you to come to Georgia, and then find out that yeah, well, you're going to have to work your way out of that debt. So this is just from the Palermo protocol. The Palermo protocol is the international protocol that was adopted by the United Nations in November of 2000 as part of the United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime. We in the countering trafficking world, we very much looked to the Palermo protocol as a guidance for how we identify victims of trafficking, how we work with law enforcement or work with the government to either investigate, prosecute, or provide protection to victims of trafficking with government resources. So the Palermo protocol is very important, but it does mean that it takes the action, the means, and the purpose. So that's why we qualify these cyber scams as trafficking in persons. Again, the community of countering trafficking in persons, we look at the 4 Ps, the 4 Ps being prevention, protection, prosecution, and partnership. Partnership is essential. And our program, as other programs, we work with other international organizations. I've already mentioned some of the UN agencies, the Office of the Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, ASEAN in Asia. We work with international NGOs and with national NGOs. I showed you some of the media coverage. Working with the media is very important to raise the awareness to to the risks of trafficking and also to the risks of the scams that the traffickers are forcing these people to do, and not to give in to those opportunities, which end up not being opportunities but scams. Obviously, we work with the government, law enforcement, border control, consular officials, and all criminal justice institutions. So the courts, prosecutors, advocates, and the like. And we also work with private sector. And here I would say that one of the important things that we do is we do try to work with some of the big IT firms, with Meta, for example, because recruitment through Facebook, recruitment through WhatsApp, recruitment through Instagram is very prevalent. So we're trying to work with Meta so that they can also identify the recruiting scams and reduce, therefore, the possibility of more people falling into that scam. This is another video by the Mekong Club.
How to avoid being trafficked into a scam center. Human trafficking into scam centers is a fast-growing global problem, whereby young professional people are tricked into participating in illegal activities like online fraud and identity theft. Taking advantage of high unemployment rates, financial struggles, or simply the increasing desire for overseas adventures, traffickers use manipulative tactics to entice victims with promises of a better life and new experiences. However, upon arrival, victims are confined and forced to scam people from around the world. They face torture or even death if they refuse to comply. This is a global issue, with victims being trafficked from over 65 countries to conduct online fraud in a calculated and highly sophisticated manner, resulting in billions of dollars of losses. Here are 9 recommendations that will help you to avoid being trafficked into a scam center. Research and understand. Educate yourself about human trafficking and familiarize yourself with its signs and common tactics used by traffickers. Follow reputable sources, official websites, and local news channels to stay informed and aware of potential risks. Awareness is the first line of defense. Be cautious of job offers. Exercise caution when receiving job offers that seem too good to be true, particularly those that promise high wages and/or attractive benefits with minimal requirements for qualifications. Verify recruitment agencies. If you're dealing with a recruitment agency, make sure it's reputable and licensed. Research its background, read reviews, and verify its credentials with relevant government authorities or labor agencies. Cross-check information. When considering a job offer, independently verify the information provided, such as the company's contact details, website, and address. If possible, reach out to the company directly through official channels to confirm the legitimacy of the offer. Avoid unofficial channels. Beware of job offers or recruitment processes that solely rely on unofficial communication channels, such as social media platforms or personal email addresses. Legitimate companies typically use official channels for job postings and communication. Involve trusted individuals. Discuss any job offers or opportunities with family members, friends, or trusted advisors. Seek their opinions and insights, as they may identify potential red flags that you might have missed. Don't share personal documents or money. Be cautious about providing personal identification documents, financial information, or money to unknown individuals or organizations, especially if they request it up front or without a valid reason. Trust your intuition. If something feels off, or you sense any pressure, manipulation, or coercion during the recruitment process, trust your instincts and walk away. Your safety and well-being should always be a priority. Report suspicious activities. If you encounter any suspicious activities related to human trafficking or believe you've come across a scam, report it immediately to local law enforcement authorities, anti-trafficking organizations, or the embassy or consulate of your country. Remember, prevention and awareness are crucial in combating human trafficking. By staying informed, being vigilant, and seeking assistance from trusted sources, you can protect yourself and contribute to the fight against this heinous crime.
So I think that's a pretty good overview of some very good advice. I wanted to mention under partnerships as well. Obviously, Winrock partners with USAID, through which we're currently funding the Safe Migration in Central Asia project. But also the Department of State has a TIP office that's called JTIP, but they also have work that focuses on anti-trafficking through the International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Division of the Department of State. UN agencies include the UN Organization for Drugs and Crime, the International Organization for Migration, also the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe that I mentioned does amazing work. They just had a 2-day alliance meeting. It's an annual meeting where they bring together CTIP professionals from the OSCE area, which is mostly Europe, but also the United States, Canada, and as far in as Central Europe and any other former Soviet states. We also, of course, you may be familiar with Interpol. Frontex is a European organization like Interpol. There are national organizations like Winrock International, but also international organizations. I've mentioned our partners, the Mekong Club, Human Research Consultancy. There's also the International Justice Mission, is doing amazing work, also doing a lot of rescues in Southeast Asia right now. In Europe, La Strada has been very strong in fighting trafficking in persons since the late 1990s. ICMPD is based in Turkey, and they have been increasing their activities in the anti-trafficking space, as well as the US-based Eurasia Foundation that has also been working on anti-trafficking projects. I mentioned these organizations, and there's others. Caritas is another organization. World Vision is another organization that has done quite a bit of work in anti-trafficking space, because they are also potential employers for you. If you want to be part of the solution, don't discount the possibility that organizations like those listed here may also be looking for great young professionals who can work in the information space and help find solutions to these ever increasing, unfortunately, complex schemes that can affect you. And I hope that they won't, and I hope that the recruitment services at IU will also be aware of it, so that we're warning people if somebody does get an offer that they would come to you, Jodie, or to other placement offices within the university to really discuss the offers and see if they are actually legitimate.
Yeah, thank you.
So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, what a wonderful presentation. Definitely we encourage students to reach out to us if anything is suspicious. We've certainly had a lot of them this spring. I think that's just a trend. The more we educate students, we said, the more educated criminals get also, and the more sneaky and, realistic these offers, unfortunately, are seeming. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions, Ellie? Do you have time for that today?
Please. Yes.
Awesome. So kind of walk us through, like, how did you get involved with this organization, and, why is it such compelling work to you? It would seem so depressive so much of the time. How do you know, I guess, just that you're doing good work, and how did you get involved?
Yeah, I think that I think that it's really, most of my career, most of my checkered career has been the result of just serendipity and recognizing opportunities when they present themselves. Um, I was working in Ukraine, actually, for Indiana University, the School of Public and Environmental Affairs, SPIA, had a USAID project working with the parliament in Ukraine. And that started in July of 1994. And I went to be the what we called it then, the field coordinator, or the in-country director of that program. And that program was it was really very exciting. It was kind of Parliament 101, but we did a lot of work on basic parliamentary practice, including how to reach out to the community, to citizens, to get feedback on draft legislation, to get feedback on policy, and to understand the needs of your constituents when you are actually a member of a body of representative governance and not just a rubber stamp council. So through that work, we would reach out to different young, recently forming community organizations, and Winrock had started a project called the Commonwealth of Independent States Women's Council, and Women's Consortium, sorry. And the CIS Women's Consortium was a way for different recently formed NGOs that were focused on women's rights, anti-domestic violence, women's empowerment, women's economic empowerment, women's education. And so we had been working with Winrock, with some of these organizations in building a bridge between the Parliament and the Human Rights Committee and these women's organizations that were fighting for and advocating for changes in legislation. So that's how Winrock got to know me. They were experiencing a change in personnel, and reached out to me and said, do you want to take over this project? And I said, I'm no expert in trafficking. I'm not a prosecutor. I'm not a law enforcement person. What do I know about that? I don't know nothing about birth and babies. And it turned out that it really was about providing guidance to these amazing NGOs that did know a lot about human trafficking, that did know a lot about the vulnerabilities of women who, at that point, it was mostly women who were being trafficked out of Ukraine into Western Europe and the Middle East. So that was how I learned about the anti-trafficking community. But I left that job after about 2 years to go back to do parliamentary work, this time in Armenia. But I never left it behind. And every place that I would go, and usually I was doing more parliamentary work, every place that I would go, I would say, you have a national action plan against trafficking in persons. What is the Parliament's role in that? What about the budget for that national action plan? Are you getting feedback on whether the laws that you have put in place are working? And so we would use anti-trafficking as a theme for parliamentary practice. And so I stayed part of the CTIP community in that way, much as I stayed as part of the library community in a similar way, quite frankly, was to say, okay, how are you doing your research? Where are you getting your information? How are you storing your information? How are you managing your parliamentary records? And all of that came from my library school learning opportunities. So although I've never, I want to say I've never worked in a library. I've almost never worked in a library, but I certainly have used librarianship in almost all of my career.
Yeah, that's an amazing journey, isn't it? And then it's so funny how they just like met perfectly at the cornerstone of like library researching all those skills, and then the technical aspect of that, and how you've brought in your governance expertise as well. What do you recommend for students who might be interested in this type of work? Like what kind of classes or what kind of degrees would make them hireable for such companies that do work like you?
I think any courses in analytics would be a valuable asset to any organization, whether it's an NGO or a government organization or a private sector company. But I think analytics is a huge need. Big data. I mean, you can't predict trends without knowing how you're collecting the data and how to adequately analyze it. I think that is very important. I think management courses are always valuable. Whether it's personnel management, whether it's organizational management, whether it's budget management, all of those skills that were in the library management course absolutely crossed over and have been valuable to me in my work. I also think that the courses in freedom to read, in the rights of a patron in the library, or the rights of excuse me, the rights of a community to have a library. I think part of that is advocacy, and I think you can use advocacy whether it's for your job or it's for your community. I think having those skills in advocacy are huge. And I really, and this, I think ethics. Wherever I go, it's about integrity. And if you remember that first slide that I showed about the values of Winrock International, integrity and accountability are huge. And when we're talking about the information space and the information industry, I think without ethics, we face our own peril. If we're not conscientiously really applying ethical standards to the development of the tools that we're creating, I think we're doing a disservice to our communities. And so I would say ethics is really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Going back to like the data portion and how important data is in all of this, like what has been I know you said you can't predict the trend, but what has been the trend that you have seen in the, like in the past? For instance, are most of the victims, are they, getting to be on a more global scale, or do these scammers typically start small and grow out? What kind of trends are there? I did notice that Americans are in that group,
yes,
obviously, of victims, and what are the numbers on the American victims also? Do you have that figure?
I don't have that figure right at my fingertips, but I will say this. In the beginning, they were looking for English speaking, IT savvy individuals. Now that has expanded to Russian speaking, Arabic speaking, French speaking. We're finding it in, and Chinese, for example. I mean, there's a lot of scamming of Chinese as well. So I think, you know, in Southeast Asia, that certainly has been, there's been a lot of Chinese victims, and they're not only scamming outside in other countries, but they're also scamming Chinese, so and Taiwanese. So I think that the trend was, at first, you know, it was that narrow thing, and now this has grown to that exponential level. I also think that at first it was mostly men. We're seeing a much higher level of women who have become victims, and we find out about them from the people that have been rescued. And I think one of the interesting things in that Deutsche Welle film is that they have quite a bit of an interview with the victims who have escaped, and have, at very great risk, have taken photographs and videos inside the scamming camps, and have gotten those out to as evidence of what is going on inside. And what we are finding is that through those repatriated escapees, we're finding that women are also being trapped into the scams. I think also I don't know how to say this. The incentives are higher. So, you know, it used to be, oh, we'll offer you a really good job, come to Thailand, and we'll put you to work. Now they're saying, oh, we'll pay for you to come to Thailand. We will put you, you know, we will pay for your first 5 months of housing. You know, I mean, it looks like a great package. You know, it's like, wow, I'm just getting out of school and I've got this great offer. You know, and so that's the newest scam, is really making it an enticing offer. So I think that is really that's one of the newer trends.
Yeah, I wondered, you know, like what common threads through some of these job offers, you know, you're seeing. Obviously, paid housing, transportation would be very, you know, very enticing to young people, particularly.
And one, you know, one anecdotal story is when you know, he arrives in Bangkok, and he thinks he should be going into the city, and yet he's going in the other direction. You know, having your passport taken at the airport, that's a big sign. I you know, if at that point I would, you know, I would make a scene. You know, I'd say, hey, you're not taking my passport. I would scream. I'd say, police, police, whatever. You know, let them, you know, if it's legitimate, they should not insist on taking your passport. So I think that's another, you know, another thing that can be done if you're at that level, at that stage already. You know, I think the Mekong Club video, the 9 recommendations of what to do, you know, and I think the recommendation to talk it over with your family, you know, sometimes somebody will say, God, you know, that just sounds too good to be true. You know, are you sure this? You know, but at the same time, you know, they have, the traffickers themselves has this insidious pattern where they're having, you know, people call people they know, right? So I think that's also a red flag now, is, you know, to say, you know, oh, gee, that's really interesting. How can I, you know, how can I contact the company? You know, not following through just because your friend or your relative is providing you the information, but say, you know, yeah, but I really want to see the contract before I commit to this. You know, I'm glad that it's working out for you, but I'm not sure that it's the right thing for me. You know, maybe I should find out some more information first. You know, unfortunately, not always to trust people, even that, because they may have been forced into recruiting you.
Yeah, that's a great aspect I hadn't thought of. So that's very important. Tell me, Ellie, if you can, like, what does a typical day look like for you? I'm sure it's different probably from day to day, but like, what are some of the typical days that you've experienced?
It's an office job, but I think typically I think maybe not a typical day, but maybe a typical month. We work with NGOs, so very often we'll go to training events that they're organizing, or we'll do training for our own NGOs or for our government partners. Last week I was working with the Human Rights Commissioner of Kazakhstan, as well as the academician who had drafted the labor code for Kazakhstan, a woman who runs the Union of Crisis Centers in Kazakhstan, and one of our NGO partners who is a major player in the countering trafficking community in Kazakhstan. And we did a program for rural areas in southern Kazakhstan for what we call frontline officers. So healthcare providers, educators, labor inspectors, criminal justice actors, advocates, prosecutors, and also law enforcement investigators. And so what we try to do is go out and say, okay, these are the instruments and the tools that are available to you. This is how you can use them. So designing training programs and then working with our partners to implement that training is very much a part of our work. I do a lot of budgeting. I'm right now I'm like, in my budget cycle. So doing budgeting, I have to be familiar with the local laws in terms of doing banking, signing contracts with whether it's with contractors, consultants, or our NGO partners in grants. Also working with other organizations, working with some of these other partners like UNODC or OSCE or the US State Department. We just had a US State Department visit to Turkmenistan, where we're doing some amazing work on eradicating forced labor in the cotton industry in Turkmenistan, and a very high level State Department official was making a visit, so we were involved in organizing that visit, having the visit, reporting on the visit. So we do a lot of that, and then I have a quarterly report that's due, and I've got to edit that, so I do a lot of editing, yeah, do a lot of different things.
Yeah, I mean, as usual, an office environment, you wear many hats, and I think we all do a little bit of that. Tell me, when does your contract with Winrock end, and then what are your next steps in your career?
Well, as I said, we're waiting and we're hoping. And if I look at my email after I get offline, I might find out that we just got extended. We are hoping that we have a 2-year extension for this project, but it will probably be much smaller. So I will probably transition off the project, and we will have one of our local country coordinators take over my position. Absolutely capable and happy that they will have that opportunity. And then I will go home to upstate New York, where I bought a house in 2019. I've never had a home to go to before, so I'm kind of looking forward to that. And then I hope to do some short-term consulting work, whether it's mentoring colleagues like my colleague who's going to take over this program, or maybe doing some training, or possibly working with organizations on grant proposals, new project proposals, or as a very good friend of mine used to say, Ellie, after 55, you don't implement projects, you evaluate them. So maybe I'll be doing some program evaluation as well. So I hope to garden and take care of my art collection. So that's my plan. And to visit IU in October.
Yeah, we look forward to I've mentioned that you have want to come back to IU in the fall, maybe, and so we're trying to work something out for October of 2024. That's very exciting. When was the last time that you were back on campus?
Actually, it was the day that the Luddy School became the Luddy School.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that's an important day.
I was at the Dean's Council's meetings when that was announced. So I think that was what, October of 2019?
I think 2019 it must have been. Yeah,
Yeah.
very exciting. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this is just such important work that you're doing, and I appreciate you letting us, into the inner works of what to look for. It's so going to be so impactful for students to really take to heart what you have said today. And I know that it, validates everything that we've been telling them, everything their professors tell them, and probably everything they've ever heard about what to look for. I think when people are looking for that golden opportunity, we hope that it's pure gold and it's as good as they say. But as you so elegantly put it, like, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So we definitely appreciate your wisdom today and look forward to hearing from you in the fall, perhaps. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Jodie. Thanks very much, and good luck to everybody. For anybody who's graduating, congratulations. And I hope to see those who are continuing their studies the next time I'm at Bloomington. Thanks.
Absolutely.